Welcome to today's show, Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Burgess, passionate, inspirational speaker, author, poet, and entrepreneur. Welcome to Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count. I want to dedicate today's show to someone near and dear to me, my dad. Now, my dad crossed over many, many years ago, but you know what? His presence, his spirit lives on, and I actually feel his presence every single day. So here's to you. Thank you, Dad. I appreciate you, and thank you for being present for me always. My special guest today is Alaina Love, a fellow expert in leadership. Her special expertise is people, and specifically, Alaina is an expert on passion and purpose. If you missed my show last week, be sure to catch the podcast of my first conversation with Alaina. It aired last week. As always, I want to give a big thank you to those of you listening in today. And here's a big shout out to all of you listening around the world. I'm delighted and so grateful that you tuned in. I sure hope you're enjoying a fabulous day today and that you're having a fantastic week. Because you know what? In the grand song of the universe, life is very, very short. It's short and sweet and very, very precious. So I hope you're making a difference in your own life, because when you do, you also make a difference in someone else's life. Now, a lot of folks ask me, Dr. Burgess, I want to make my life count for something, but how do I do that? And I tell them, it's really very simple. Very simple. You make your life count day by day, step by step, moment by moment, smile by smile, every single day. 365, 24/7. That's what Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count is all about. Now, you can learn more about Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count by visiting the Gloria Burgess website. That's Gloria, B as in boy, URGESS.com. That's the Gloria Burgess website, Gloria, B as in boy, URGESS.com, or by visiting my Facebook page. And that's facebook.com/DR, DR as in doctor, Gloria, BURGESS, PHD /. Now, as many of you know, I have a special burden in my heart to reach folks not only here in the United States, but all around the world, especially those folks who don't have equal access to information, and in particular, the kind of information I share here on my show. So again, my hat's off to you. Thank you for sharing the wealth. Today, I want to talk with you once again about passion and purpose, topics that are very near and dear to my heart. Specifically, we're going to focus on a new way to look at passion and purpose and how both are linked to your core identity, to who you are. In other words, today's show is all about asking yourself, what on earth am I here for, right? How might I bring my unique gifts forward in my life, in my relationships, in my work, with my team, with my community, in my neighborhood? I know that you all have burning questions about how to do this. And here today, to help us address these questions, I have a very special guest, and her name is Alaina Love. Now, Alaina is a person of influence, and she's an expert in helping us understand who we are and what on earth we're here for. She's deeply passionate about her work, and she's very, very inspiring. Alaina is a leader. She's a leader who makes a difference in her own life and in the lives of so many others throughout the world through her work with passion and purpose. Alaina is the co-author of the best-selling book called The Purpose-Linked Organization. I love that title, The Purpose-Linked Organization. And the subtitle is How Passionate Leaders Inspire Winning Teams and Great Results. Alaina also has a new book in the works, and her upcoming book is called Passionality. Passionality. I love it. Alaina's new book explores the art and science of well-being. It also provides tools for bringing purpose and passion into our daily lives. Now, in many ways, Alaina's outlook on life and in her work pulls together the many threads of what my own life and work are all about. Now, you've heard me talk about these threads and themes on this show. The themes of authenticity, integrity, hope, passion, purpose, and possibility. Alaina and I had a wonderful conversation, and I'm so excited to have this amazing leader on with us today. This is going to be a fabulous show today. You don't want to miss a single word. So, put on your walking shoes, grab your earbuds, or grab yourself a cup of tea or coffee, or a nice cool glass of water, a glass of juice, and relax in your favorite chair. You're going to want to take notes today. We're going to have a great time. But before I jump into today's show, I just want to take a moment to welcome you. If you're just joining us, I'm your host, Dr. Gloria. This is Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count. I'd like to extend a very special welcome to those of you joining my show, or if you're joining the Talk Network Radio for the very first time. Let me tell you something. You are in for a real treat. I'm excited to have you listening in today, and I'm deeply honored that you've allowed me to be part of your day so you can be inspired by the ideas and resources to make your life count. Today's show is all about passion and purpose and discovering your core identity as a leader. So let's talk a little bit about your upcoming book, which is called Passionality. And I know that you have taken this work much further than what we've already covered. Can you talk a little bit about how expressing our passions can shape and influence our overall health and well-being?
Well, it's really interesting as I began doing the work to create this next book, Passionality. That old scientist in me sort of reared its head again, and I began to wonder what's out there in the literature that makes a connection between passion and well-being. And there's an entire field of what's called positive psychology now.
Yes.
That's just ripe with information around this. And I began to investigate it. I wanted to understand a little bit more about it. And I kept running into information over and over again that was making this connection between our passions and how our lives are led in a way in which we feel that they're authentic, which in turn reduces the level of stress that we feel every single day. Getting up and putting a costume on and pretending to be somebody else every day is pretty tiring, pretty exhausting. And when we can work from a place of our true selves, we tend to feel a better sense of well-being. And as the researchers and scientists have looked at this connection, they've begun to realize that when we are not working from that place, we are actually damaging our health and well-being.
Mm-hmm.
And, intuitively, we all understand that. If we've learned over the years that if we're working in very stressful situations, that it can cause all kinds of different disease issues with us. Well, what's really interesting is that there's a whole body of research on this that are being done in a variety of different arenas. One, for example, is a study that's been done routinely for many, many years by the Gallup organization, where they've looked at levels of engagement at work. And by that I mean that sense of I'm happy to get up and go to work in the morning. I feel like I'm doing work that's important. I feel a sense of connection to my work. I'm happy to be there. And they go into organizations routinely and they measure levels of employee engagement. And what they noticed is that when they went back to the same company and remeasured engagement up to 2 years later, the individuals who were considered to be disengaged at work in that first study, people who weren't happy in their jobs, maybe were even toxically miserable at work. If they went back and measured that same population again a couple of years later, those folks who were disengaged were more than 2 times more likely than their coworkers to have been diagnosed with depression. Mm-hmm. So working in that environment actually drove them to mental unhealthy situations.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Then other studies have been done that have looked at what happens when you continue to work from that place in your life and in your job, and you have your DNA looked at. There is a study done measuring the telomere on the end of the DNA strand, which is sort of, think of it like the protective plastic coating that you have on the end of a shoestring that keeps it from unraveling. The telomere plays that same role for our DNA. It protects it from oxidation. And when individuals are living and working outside of the zone of their passions and their purpose, or living and working in what I'll call stressful situations, it actually affects the telomere of the DNA, and the telomere shortens, making the DNA much more susceptible to oxidation, which in turn brings on chronic diseases, heart disease, diabetes, other kinds of illnesses. What's more concerning is that you actually pass that shortened DNA on to your offspring.
Oh, my.
So someone who is living in that situation, who then has children, has passed that DNA on to their children. So the children are actually at a disadvantage before they're even born. So that was a significant finding. And it's been borne out in some other work in that same arena. I'm failing to remember the name of the book that was just published that looked at some of that data. But if I do remember it, I'll let you know. The other thing that the research is showing is that when people are either happy or unhappy at work, despite the fact that you might think you can keep others from knowing about it, you actually can't. There was this wonderful study done in Europe where they looked at couples who were married and living together, both of whom worked. And they found that when one or the other of the spouse was having a good experience at work, it actually impacted the relationship and the mood of the other person. Mm-hmm. And the reverse was also true. When someone was having a bad experience at work, it actually crossed over to their spouse.
Yes.
And they also found that it impacted their children as well. So if the parents were miserable and unhappy in their jobs and not feeling like that they had a sense of purpose and passion for their work, they noticed that the children were acting out more at school, getting in trouble more often than parents who had a good and happy, fulfilling experience.
What you're talking about, I do a lot of work in this arena of positive psychology, but it's connected to gratitude, not passion per se. And gratitude and passion are actually linked as well, but that's another conversation.
It's true. It absolutely is true. Mm-hmm.
And so what you're saying to me just is so present and resonant for me. Thank goodness that we're engaged in this kind of conversation and that you're deeply engaged in this kind of work, Alaina. So what you're saying is, not only in the workplace, but at home and our well-being there, all of these obviously intersect. You made a comment earlier about the 85,000 hours of our lives at work. I mean, that's an astounding amount of time. When we think about just the day, just one day, we spend, 8 to 10 hours of our waking time at work, and most of the rest of that is sleeping
Exactly.
or getting up and getting ready to go to work. And just how all of these things are so intimately connected. Can you tell us about, in the book that you're working on, Passionality, how might we use the research that you have told us about, have shared with us? How can we use this in our home life, for example? I mean, what would be a practical application of what you're talking about?
Well, I think the first thing that I hope this book leaves people with is permission to be who they are. If there is nothing else they get out of it, it's really okay to be who you are unapologetically and to pursue things that resonate with you and give you a sense of purpose. That is not a self-indulgent exercise. It's actually critical to your well-being. It's critical to the well-being of your family. And I think it's critical to the planet. I'd much rather we had, a world full of people that were loving what they're doing and loving the way in which they're expressing themselves and contributing than the opposite. In terms of, what can this book help you do, I think what it will help people understand is how to navigate the three most important relationships that they have in their lives. The relationship that they have with themselves, number one, is a really important relationship. There are conversations going on in our heads all the time about ourselves. There are judgments that we're making or not making about ourselves all the time. And understanding your passions, I think, helps individuals understand why I'm hearing certain things that I'm hearing in my mind about myself, and how do I want to respond to that, to those discussions that I'm having with myself, and why are there certain situations that I find myself in that really seem to be ones that make my heart sing, and others that are so negative to me. Understanding your passions gives you a lot of insight into that. For example, if I'm somebody who is a processor archetype, and I'm very analytical, and I like structure, and I really don't like chaos, when I'm in situations that are chaotic and where it seems like people don't know what they're doing, I'm uncomfortable. I feel like things are out of control. It's not going to work for me. I need to understand that about myself and why I feel that way. When I think about the relationships that I have with others, people that I love, my friends, my loved ones, folks that I'm closest to, understanding my passions helps me to understand how I'm impacting them in the relationship that I have with them. How are they perhaps seeing me based on these passions? And are there perceptions about me that might be based on the passions that I have that I might want to clarify with them so that we are interfacing with one another more effectively? And then when I think about the relationship that I have with my work, how is it that I want to bring those passions to the job that I am in? Or how do I want those passions to shape the job I choose to pursue so that I'm not maybe chasing after a career because my parents told me I should do this or because it's something I've always done, and instead I'm choosing a career or a path for myself that I know is aligned with my skills but also will have provide me with an outlet for my passions. And I want them to understand they have permission to think that way and to pursue that, and a right to do it.
And a right, permission and a right. I know when we were talking about this, when we were just discussing your work, you talked about a GPS system. It's kind of like a guidance system to help you navigate these three important relationships.
And that's exactly what it is, because if we boil this down to its essence, our passions are our identity. We don't have to look for an identity anywhere else, and it's an identity that can't be taken away from us. And we all have a number of different labels that we identify ourselves with, for male or female or other. If we're a suburbanite or someone who's living out in the country or a city dweller, are we wealthy or not? We have all of these different labels. Are we a father or a mother? Are we practicing one religion versus another or none at all. And we get burdened by these labels, and sometimes we get very attached to them, like the labels that we have through our work, for example. What title do we have, or what company do we work for? And sometimes when those things are taken away for whatever reason, company closes, there's a downsizing, relationship with someone ends, we run the risk, if that's how we identify ourselves, of feeling this incredible sense of loss. Of now what?
I love that you're saying that this is really a distillation. As you know, I show up in a lot of different contexts, and one of the places I show up is as an educator. And my students, my graduate students, are always talking about these different identities, and I'm going like, those are not your identities.
Exactly.
They're labels, like you said,
yes.
And they're things that we almost have a fixation about.
Yes.
But when you talk about your work and passion and purpose, and that really those two things interlinked are really the essence, the core of who we are, and the other things that we ascribe to ourselves are not that. They're labels that we have taken on.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love it how you have simplified, not made it simplistic, but really simplified and distilled the essence of passion and purpose.
And it's, Gloria, it's so important. I have had the privilege of meeting many wonderful people, many wonderful leaders, many wonderful individuals. I've also had the opportunity to work inside a large multinational organization, which is basically a microcosm of the larger world.
Yes.
And I have had the misfortune, I'll call it that. Maybe it's fortunate that I saw it, but it was a misfortune for another individual, of watching someone become so attached to an external label that they were devastated when it was taken away. I remember working in an HR position, and we'd made a decision about appointing from a selection of candidates someone to a vice president's position. There were several people in the succession plan, and a decision was made that we were going to give it to person X. And the individuals who were under consideration were told about the decision on a Friday afternoon, as I recollect. We had planned to announce it to the rest of the organization, the rest of the organization on, I think, that following Monday. This individual who did not receive the promotion to that role, who I believe thought he would, went home that weekend, walked out into the shed in his backyard, the gardening shed, and blew his brains out because he did not get that job.
Yeah.
So for him, his identity was so tied up in this job, this title, this organization, that I can't imagine the devastation he felt to make that decision, that was the only way to stop the pain.
Yes.
And when people don't know who they are, they're not connected to the deeper identity that we've been talking about today, the risk is high that we will have some very, very painful experiences.
Well, and as work becomes more and more central to our lives, as more people have access to work in our culture in the United States, not everyone, but certainly a majority, we can enter in this conversation about work, and more internationally, work will become the focus of our lives. So what you have uncovered in your research, Alaina, and what you're writing about and what you're making available to individuals, I think is just so rich and so important. And I know we're running up against the clock here, and before we wrap up for today, I would love it if you would talk about any projects that you're working on that you would like to make sure that our listeners hear about, anything that you're working connected to this conversation, or anything else.
Well, what I'm intrigued with right now, I'm always intrigued with something. What I'm intrigued with right now is the connection between the research that's being done on relationships, personal romantic relationships, and how what's being learned there could have an effect on how we look at our relationship with our work. And it's interesting because it's remarkable that there is this connection. There's a theory of self-expansion that a wonderful researcher that I know at Monmouth University in New Jersey is working on. His name is Gary Lewandowski. He's the chair of the Department of Psychology. And I sat down with him just recently to talk about this work. And the theory of self-expansion is really looking at this notion of what it takes to sort of keep these long-lasting relationships. You know, the ones where you hear about people being married for 50 years and still happy, and you know, you wonder, you know, how do you stay with the same person for 50 years? Oh my gosh, you know, and eats the same bowl of cornflakes every day. Can you stand it? But what's interesting about this particular work is that this theory of self-expansion is really saying that those relationships work because each individual is interested in self-expansion. Each individual is interested in growth and in learning. And if they can have those growth and learning experiences together, it's even better. And that is what causes those relationships to be long and rich. Because after a while, some of the romance starts to wane, and some things start to wear off that, you know, used to be maybe sexually exciting to you about that individual. But when that individual continues to learn and grow, and you learn and grow with them, then those relationships are richer.
And so the connection between the romantic relationships and work, this self-expansion notion, can you elaborate a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the relationship with it as it relates to work is that looking for opportunities for self-expansion at work actually helps you fall in love with your job. So things that challenge and stretch you, opportunities to take on new projects, opportunities to learn new things in fields perhaps that you hadn't been exposed to before. Those things are enriching and self-expansion building for you, and in fact help you develop a different relationship with your work. So when we think about it, taking on new challenges at work, rather than being afraid of them, we probably should really lean into them, because they're an opportunity for us to grow and develop personally, and for us to develop a different and closer affection, I'm going to put that in air quotes, affection for our jobs. So
and the benefit to employers, my mind is just running rampant here, but the benefit to employers is obviously the investment that they've made in this particular person. The return on that investment is obviously more robust, and as an HR executive, I'm sure you probably have lots of links to that benefit as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when we, as leaders or managers of others, can recognize that the opportunities that we design for people to have enriching and self-expanding developmental experiences at work is growing them, is growing the degree to which they can contribute to the organization, and when we get them in that zone where we're also connecting it to their passions, we are getting discretionary effort that we can never afford to pay for. And that becomes our competitive edge. Passion is the next competitive edge. Organizations that figure that out, that understand the value of the whole person and bringing that whole person to the role that they ask them to play, all other things being equal, especially in a commoditized industry, all other things being equal, that's the organization that's going to win. Hands down, every time.
Absolutely.
Passion matters.
Yes. Well, thank you, Alaina, and I just can't thank you enough for your passion and your rigorous background that you bring to this. A lot of people talk about passion in the workplace and purpose and all of that, but you bring a rigor to the work that is not common, and you bring a passion. You're so centered and grounded in your passion. I can just hear it in your voice. So thank you for listening to that voice of calling, even when you didn't have the language for it all those years ago when you had this opportunity to step into a corporate position that really was not the right fit for you. So
well,
thank you.
I'm very grateful to you and to your listeners for listening. This is my life's work. This is what I am here to do, and I'm happy to talk to anyone about it at any time because it brings me joy.
Well, thank you. I would love to have you back as a guest if you'd like to do that and really talk to us in more detail about the 10 archetypes and just really explain that more. I'm sure our listeners would benefit and be thrilled to listen to you more. So thank you.
I'd be delighted to do that because there's a lot of depth there. So let's make a date and we'll do it again.
All right, we'll do that. Thanks, Alaina.
You're so welcome. Thank you, Gloria.
Great. Wonderful pearls of wisdom. Thanks again to Alaina Love for being my guest. Now be sure to listen to last week's show if you missed it to hear more from Alaina. Last week, she talked about the importance of discovering your passion and purpose in the workplace. Now I want to share something with you from someone near and dear to my heart, and her name is Lee. She also happens to be my assistant. And she says, "Hi, Gloria. I check into your show periodically when you have guests." She says, "I just listened to Alaina. Wow." Wow, she's so articulate. Lee says, "I wrote down this passage from your interview. When someone's really excited about what they're doing, they're working and thinking about their work during the times you're not paying them to do it." Now, remember when Alaina said that? Now, Lee is saying, in my experience, that's so true. And you're right. In my experience with you, now this is Lee talking again, in my experience with you, Gloria, when we worked together, you were leading in the ways Alaina talks about. You encouraged us to bring our whole self to work. And that was so revolutionary for me. Now, Lee is my current assistant, and in another lifetime ago, she was also my assistant in an organization. And so that's what she's talking about. Lee says, in our check-ins and year-end evaluations, you continually encourage development. And as Alaina said, there's the paycheck, and then there's fulfillment. Lee, I just want to thank you for allowing me to share what you wrote to me in that email. Thank you. And again, my hat's off to Alaina for her incredible heart, for her work, her passion, and the rigor that she brings to it as a research scientist and as a champion for bringing our whole selves to our relationships at home and at work. If you'd like to learn more about Alaina's work, you can reach out to her on Twitter. Her Twitter name is @@workwithpassion. @workwithpassion. And you can reach out to her on Facebook at facebook.com/thepurposelink/. That's facebook.com/thepurposelink, all smushed together, /. Now, you can also access the resources and tools that Alaina offers at one of these websites, thepurposelink.com, or at mypassionality.com. Now, I'm going to spell that last one. It's MyPassion, as in passion, ALITY, mypassionality.com. Okay? All right. Now, if you missed any part of this week's broadcast about passion and purpose, where we delved into the question, what am I here for, you can listen to the podcast right here on Talk Network Radio, or you can catch us on iTunes, SoundCloud, Alexa, and many, many other places. Before I close today's show, I just want to give a shout-out to all of the dads out there. Now, I dedicated this show to my own father. Why? Because our dads make such a big difference in our lives, don't they? I know my dad made a huge difference in my life, and he still does. You know, he passed away almost 30 years ago, but he's always present for me. And it's actually amazing how much impact we have as leaders in our own home, with our own children, with our own family. So dads and moms, I'm going to say this once again, even if it seems like your kids are not paying any attention to you at all, let me tell you something, they are. They are. They're listening. They're soaking it in. And more than anything else, they are watching you. That's right. They're watching you. Now, let me be really clear. They are scoping you out because, they observe everything you do and say. And most importantly, they're watching you to see if what you say and what you actually do line up, right? Now, our actions really do speak much, much louder than our words, don't they? A good friend of mine, who's a former CEO, always says, as a parent, as a leader, in any context, at work, at home, in your team, in your neighborhood, doesn't matter. Okay? In any context, your walk has got to talk louder than your talk talks. Your walk talks louder than your talk talks. I love that. Now, why is that? Because that's how we build bridges with one another. And in particular, that's how we build the bridge called trust. That's how we strengthen our bond with those we love, with those we care for. That's how we deepen our relationships, one step at a time, inch by inch, mile by mile, conversation by conversation, decision by decision, text by text, smile by smile, at home, at work, and in any other areas of our life. Every single day, 365, 24/7. So ask yourself, how is my walk lining up with my talk? You know what? It's never too late to line up your walk and your talk, to get your act together so you can take it on the road, right? Because when you make a difference in someone else's life, you make a difference that only you can make. There's certain people out there who can only hear your particular voice. I might say essentially the same thing as you, but they can't hear me, right? But they can certainly hear you. And remember this, how you live is how you do everything else. Relationships, friendships, doesn't matter. How you live is how you lead in your personal life, in your community, in your neighborhood, with your kids, with your family, and with your teams at work. Legacy doesn't happen somewhere in the distant future. It happens every single day, day by day, 365, 24/7. Now, if you happen to miss any part of this week's broadcast, or if you missed last week's show, you can listen to a podcast anytime at your convenience. You can even listen to it on the go. That's what I like to do.
Check us out at www.talknetworkradio.com/hosts/legacy living. That's talknetworkradio.com/hosts/legacy living. And on iTunes, Audible, Alexa, SoundCloud, iHeart, TuneIn, Spreaker.com, and so many other places. You can learn more about my work and Legacy Living Make Your Life Count by visiting the Gloria Burgess website. And, as I've mentioned before, if you love to be inspired, you can actually subscribe to my inspirations right on my website. Just scroll down a little bit, look on the right sidebar until you see the place to add your email address to subscribe to my weekly inspirations. It's that simple. Each week, you get a lovely photograph and a short quotation that inspires you. You can also find me on the TEDx site and listen to one of my TED Talks. Just type in my name to find me there.
Now, I want to thank you for tuning into today's show, and I want to thank everyone for allowing me to share a bit of my journey with you about what legacy living is all about. Not just living and learning and serving so that you make a difference in your own life and in the lives of others. It's about being on purpose, about being intentional every single day. 365, 24/7. Legacy living is one of the many ways to make your life count. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me for today's show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Burgess, and this has been Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count. Please join me again next week right here for another show of Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count. Don't just count the days in your life. Don't just count the days in your life. Make the days in your life count. That's what legacy living is all about. Hey, have a fantastic day. And remember, make the days in your life count. God bless you. That's our show today. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Burgess. I hope you'll join me again next week. Until then, don't just count the days in your life. Make the days in your life count. That's what legacy living is all about. Here's to you. Have a fantastic day. Be sure to make it a yes kind of day. And remember, celebrate. Celebrate the music of your life. Make the days in your life count.